about me. January, like the month. I am obviously not here by myself. I am joined by TJ Hare, who I refer to as coach, because I got to meet him this summer when my son started at Foreign High School and was doing cross country, his first sport ever. And Coach was instrumental in helping my son to transition into high school and all of the changes. So as a parent, he knows I couldn't thank him anymore. I thank him all the time. So learning more about what he does and his background, I asked him if he would so kindly share the stage with me tonight, and clearly he said yes, for better or for worse. So if you want to tell us, Coach, a little bit about you.
Great, thank you for those kind words. My name is TJ Hare. I am a physical educator as well as a health teacher over at Foreign High School. I coach cross country and hoping to coach girls track this spring. I've coached girls basketball as well as an assistant. My background is I have a bachelor's in science from Eastern Connecticut State University and a master's from Manhattan College, and that's in phys ed. As well as before being a teacher, I was a personal trainer as well as group trainer for about 10 years.
And he was willing to match my t-shirt tonight, so also really great. We're gonna try the clicker, see if it works. But here's what we're here to talk about. I don't love to read off of slides because y'all can read, so we're gonna really ad-lib a lot of it and just put the information up there for you. Haha, it's working. All right, so when you think about stress, right, and you're talking about different moments in your life, if you're a teenager, stress looks like one thing. If you're an adult, stress looks like another thing. But to understand what it means, sometimes it's helpful to see what a written definition might look like, right? So if I were to say, what does stress feel like to me, it's going to feel completely different than to TJ. So I spent the majority of my career, the first part of my career, working with people convicted of federal crimes. So when I tell people I really enjoy spending time in prison, that sounds weird to a lot of people, right? But to me, that's where I feel most home because I enjoy learning their stories, and that's not stressful to me. I like going in and seeing sort of what made someone go one way or another. Versus for TJ, it might be completely different, right? He is amazing at physical fitness stuff. For me, I'm like, ugh, weightlifting, ugh, scary, too stressful, can't do it, right? For you, completely different.
Yeah, definitely. In my early 20s, I was big into CrossFit as a sport for myself, so I took on a lot of the physical stress, and that doesn't seem like it is much, but it was around the clock physical stress as far as workouts 2 to 3 times a day, and that's something mentally and physically draining that someone who doesn't do a sport like that or is invested in something like that would understand that.
So I tried to capture some pictures that would hit all of our levels of stress, from a parent to a teenager. All right. I gotta really psych myself up to go to the dentist, my friends. It's like a week long, I'm gonna survive this, so I put that up there for me. I also know that being up here on stage, not stressful for me. Trying to solve anything math related, nope, not my venue, very stressful, okay? Waiting for my teenage son to write back to me sometimes, really stressful. And as a teenager, if you're writing to someone and you're waiting for a friend to write back, or you're being kept on red, that can raise a lot of anxiety, stress, concern, right? You got the bottom row.
Yes, so the word subjective, it means based on influences or personal opinions. And the one thing I really want to talk about today is Power School, that bottom left picture. So Power School is a powerful tool, or it can be very detrimental to teachers, parents, and students. As a teacher and someone who uses this regularly, it's definitely pressure to update grades immediately, and then after those grades are updated, possibly I'm getting emails from parents as well as students. So it's definitely a stressful situation being a teacher, and I'm sure it's stressful for being a parent as well as a student. There's judgment based on each grade, necessarily when it is put in, because there's that immediate response that happens. And then from there, I can give feedback, or I'm getting feedback from parents. For parents, I think the instant grade notifications can cause worry without actual context of the grade. There's pressure to monitor their child constantly, and then there's misinterpreting incomplete grades, which could cause conflict. And I hear this from my students when I'm putting grades in as a health or phys ed teacher, either one. And then as for students, there's constant grade checking, which causes anxiety, constant comparison to their peers, and pressure and or self-doubt. And then there's fear of disappointing their parents when a grade gets entered. I know I didn't have Power School growing up, so if I get a bad grade in a class, I know my parents are going to be wanting to know what's happening on the grade once I get home. So those are going to be some few things that Power School really stresses parents, teachers, and students out.
As a teenager, my hope is you don't have bills to worry about right now, but it's one of those things that the older you get, the more they seem to pile up. So, that is a stress that typically adults have that I'm not a teenager anymore, that teenagers don't have, right? So it's back and forth. What is stressful for one is not going to be for another. Being asked, who do you want to be? I'm still asking myself that. I am now in my 40s. So imagine being a teenager trying to figure out what you want to do, how you want to spend your time, what school do you want to go to, and you're like, I'm not sure. All these things cause stress. So when we feel stress, right, everyone feels it differently in their body. When I'm stressed, it looks like my shoulders are inside of my ears, right? There's that muscle tension. Sometimes people want to sleep more because they're stressed. Some people sleep less because those thoughts are going over and over. I certainly get headaches. Sometimes you can feel even out of breath just based off of the stress and the pressure that's going on in your body. I can speak to what goes on in my house. When there's multiple tests in one day, I can count, or I can almost bet that I'm going to hear, I have a stomach ache, I'm worried, or something's bothering me. That's the stress level for my teen. And then what it can cause, certainly fear, anger, sadness. Stress can cause trouble concentrating. You have so many things that you want to get done, or you're putting so much pressure on yourself, whether you're an adult or a youth. It can actually distract you because you're trying to concentrate on something, but you have all those other thoughts that are stirring around in your brain.
So piggybacking off of that, I have the whole junior class this year, and I know it's a very stressful year for students. So when students are coming into my class, they're worried about other classes, trying to catch up on grades, and I'm hearing a lot of they're not sleeping. They're studying all night or pulling all-nighters just to get the work done and just to try to get that GPA up and or a better grade. So some long-term effects are definitely sleep problems, hormonal balance. I know students don't really eat that well in school, maybe they'll skip lunch. Some mental health effects, and then avoidance or procrastination is another thing that I see that is a huge one. I know they want to get their work done, but at the same time they're avoiding a lot of it, and the procrastination is a huge thing. Changes in eating, mood swings, and then just withdrawing from social connections. I know that a lot of students can be addicted to their phone and social media, but they can be withdrawn very inward, and I can notice that when I see a student who normally is acting one way and they're acting a different way on a certain test day or maybe a presentation day, and that happens even when they're entering my class. I know I have a lot of presentations that happen in the health class, so when they are coming in, they're already heightened, they're already asking me a million questions. What's going to happen? What's this going to be like? And they're really already in that heightened sense. So stress really comes in many forms for a lot of students and can be a quiet or a loud outburst for them, but in a good way, or some may be detrimental.
My Harry Potter's not working. Okay, maybe I went too far. Okay. All right. I'm really big about having difficult conversations. So some of the information on here is very difficult to hear. We just can no longer pretend that it's not happening. So this is the slide I'm going to. TJ gets the top row and I get the bottom row.
Right, so 1 in 6 youth in the US have a mental health condition. And this is very apparent within a lot of the conversations that I'm having with students, as well as when I am with parents as well. It's something that is an epidemic that students need to learn to have coping mechanisms for, and not just within social media or sports outlets. There needs to be a constant conversation with your trusted adults and your community people that you do have with you. The next one is only half of our youth receive treatment for their mental health condition. Getting ahead and getting in front of this is something that is very important, and we try to preach within our health curriculum and health classes, and that's from freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year. Some years we will go over more in-depth in some of these problems and ways to go about helping each other, but that is definitely something that we try to make apparent within our curriculum as far as foreign and law. Today's youth face immense stress in their daily lives through social media, pressure, mass violence, and social injustice. I think the social media one is the one that I can tie the most connection to, is because I always see students on their phones and they are on Snapchat constantly, and that is one of the biggest problems I see as a teacher in our school. They are constantly in communication with their friends, and their friends are literally right next to them. They're sending a picture like this, and their friends are right there. There's no need for that constant communication that's just giving more and more pressure to who can be better, who can have a better snap score, who can have better this. Those are the things that are really troubling for our students these days.
In 2024, 11.3% of youth ages 12 to 17 experienced a major depressive episode which severely impacted their functioning at work, school, or home. These are taken from the National Council of Well-Being, which you heard in my bio. I'm a national trainer of that. The green one's hard to hear, it's hard to say. In 2024, 10.1% of youth aged 12 to 17 reported serious thoughts of suicide. Years ago, when, I'm gonna put us in the same age bracket, TJ and I were going to school, it wasn't talked about. Suicide wasn't talked about. It's thought of, and I think the myth really nationwide is that if you talk about suicide, you are going to plant that seed in someone's head. It's going to make them do it. I'm here to tell you that the evidence proves that wrong. The more you talk about it, the more you're able to at least begin the conversation. You're making it okay for someone to express how they feel. They are not alone. They are not in the dark. Is it something scary? Yes. Is it heartbreaking? Yes. But that person feels so alone, even to say, I'm here for you, right? We can no longer pretend that our youth are not choosing this as an option. They are, all over the country, from every socioeconomic status. It is happening, so we have to talk about it.
Going back to social media, with social media, the impact on the mental health is alarming. There's constant comparison and self-esteem issues, and I see this throughout my day. Everyone is seeing the highlight reels of someone on their social media app. Give it Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok is the new one. There's stress, anxiety, and constant overstimulation. The brain never gets a true rest because the constant stimulation of what is being happening is that dopamine rush is coming into the brain, and they're looking for more every single time. So the constant need to always be busy on your phone, homework, etc., is really detrimental to our students, and it's very alarming, and from what we're seeing as far as teachers. Teens struggle with face-to-face communication and conflict resolution. So this goes back to when I see students trying to give presentations. They don't want to give presentations, and they're shying away like this because they're afraid of giving eye contact. They're afraid of body language. They're afraid of what someone might say. And understanding that it's not a bad thing, but just having a conversation and getting yourself out there and putting yourself out there for the risk of that is gonna be okay. The feeling of being uncomfortable, bored, and the sense to have their phone as a security blanket is another thing that's very detrimental, and it is giving constant mental health issues because students are not having those conversations with their friends, and I don't see the socializing as much as I have in the past.
Okay, so we're sort of giving the big thumbs down to social media, which I get, and a lot of people are like, but I really love it, and it's great, and we're not saying it's all bad, and we're also not saying it is the cause of everything, okay? So people have struggled with mental health issues for decades, happened well before social media. That is just a fact. Stress is also a normal part of your day. Anyone who gets to like float around on the cloud and have no stress, tell me where you found your cloud, because I'd like to buy one, okay? We all have stress, it's natural. It also propels us to get things done, right? When we have deadlines, we're going to move forward. There's some part of that that is good for us. I remember being a teenager and thinking I knew everything, right? I was smarter than my parents, that I knew I was gonna solve the world's problems, all these things. Not true. I only know that now, and coming to learn that the prefrontal cortex of your brain, my friends who are in high school, it doesn't finish fully developing till you're 23 to 25 years old. What does that mean? Your brain can't fully understand consequences until you get to that mid-20s area. I know you think you can understand it now. I promise it's going to get better. You just haven't gotten there yet biologically. Not because it's you. just because that's how your brain and your body develops. But excessive and prolonged stress can lead to mental health challenges. So you're talking about being constantly on and searching for that next, pardon my language on this, but that next dopamine hit from a scroll, it stresses your body. But at the same time, not all social media is bad. I think some of it's really funny. I am a big fan of silly social media. A little joy in my day here, right? When I Googled silly, I love goats, so that's where that came from. But I mean, who doesn't love a tiny hawk? I've never seen one before. Now we've all seen one together. I mean, that's kind of fun. But I'm not going to stay here for the next 2 hours trying to use my thumb to find 1,700 other images of tiny hawks. Okay, so how do we address this stress that we have?
There's plenty of ways to address this, and I mean, a few of my favorites are taking a walk, working out, as I've mentioned before, coloring, dancing, and a few of the things that I try to follow and promote to our students as well is eat a healthy diet, engaging in a hobby or watching your favorite TV show, and communication and making sure you're making connections with people. And as I said before, I think making those connections are going to be what follows us through and keeps the students as well as teachers and parents involved in the constant conversation that we're trying to have.
I decided that 2025 was going to be my year of yes. So when people said, do you want to try this? I would think about, is this going to be moving me in the direction of trying new things and good for me and good for my stress? If the answer to that was yes, I said, yes, I want to do it, okay? So we now have dogs, you heard in the beginning, Ted dancing, just because that's fun and silly, so we play with the dogs. I've learned to do watercolors. I don't think they're actually good, but it's something fun I tried and said yes to, and it's something I'm enjoying. Or you could, I love to read, not everyone loves to read. I love to knit, I only know how to go straight across and down, so if you're looking for a blanket, I'm not your lady, but if you're looking for a scarf, I can do it. That's stress relieving to me. It may not be for you guys, but think outside the box, because the constant using your thumbs is not stress relieving, stress causing. I know y'all know the rest of that song. Why Jelly Roll? One, he's open and forefront about his own personal struggles with mental health, and the words are very meaningful. It's okay to not be okay. There's always someone to talk to, whether you are in high school, whether you are an adult. There is 100% always someone to talk to. You are not alone. It doesn't matter if it's a coach, if it's your friend's parent you feel comfortable talking to, your school counselor, your actual parent. There is always someone to talk to, okay? And perhaps your person is coach, and it's the summer, and you don't have the ability to get in touch with him, which I highly doubt, because he's awesome and he answers his emails. But if you couldn't, these are other resources that exist 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What's different about these resources versus asking, I'm sorry to say, but it is happening all the time. What's different about these resources than asking ChatGPT is these are legitimate clinical pieces of help. ChatGPT is going to mimic what you want to hear. It is not a licensed clinician who can help you, okay? We have matching shirts not just because we're awesome, because it represents both of these projects that are up here, okay? So 988, you can call. If you don't like to use the phone and actually hold it and talk to somebody, totally okay. We got text for that too. It's a national system. You can text it, it's completely confidential, it's 24 hours a day. They're gonna ask if you're okay, they're gonna provide you resources, okay? Doesn't matter who you are or what age you are, 988 is your friend and will connect you to a true counselor, okay? Project Semicolon, cut off a little bit here, sorry about that in the slide, but you have a flyer in there as well. Project Semicolon is a movement. nationally, I would probably say internationally at this point. The semicolon stands for someone who has had a mental health struggle and has decided to continue on with their life. It means the author didn't end it, didn't stop. They said, I'm going to continue to push forward. It's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I can tell you that the college campuses that I teach on, more than, I would say, 3, 4, 5 times a semester, I have students come up to me, having seen mine, and say, I have one too. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I see you. I hear you. So if you see a semicolon, it's not just someone enjoys reading. I mean, I do too. But it stands for something more, and it's a movement, and it's also a site that you can put in your zip code, and it'll tell you the treatment providers that are in your area. It's a little blurry, but it's colorful.
Yeah. Be strong enough to stand alone, smart enough to know when you need help, and brave enough to ask for it.
We're here, we're gonna stay. I always tell people, once I'm in your life, I mean, you've all met me here, but I'm happy to talk to anybody separately. I know TJ is too. Once you have me for life. I tell all my students that, like, whatever you need, I'm gonna do whatever I can to help you. That's my mission in life. I don't know how to not help. So it's been a pleasure to meet you all here, and we're gonna move it on to Braylee.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Braylee Wan, and I am a prevention specialist with the Alliance for Prevention and Wellness, which is a program of BH Care, if you're familiar with that organization. And I'm here to talk to you all about gambling, specifically how it relates to sports betting, which is really popular among youth right now, as well as video game related gambling and ties to substance use. So we're gonna shove a lot into a really short period of time. If you do have any questions, I'll be here after to answer them as well. Just meet me in the back, and I have business cards if you need my email. So let's dive in. All right, so I want to start out by saying that me and my organization are not anti-gambling by any means. We are gambling neutral. We recognize that gambling is a legal form of entertainment if you're of the correct age. But that age piece is really key, right? Because in almost every scenario, youth are not eligible to be gambling because it's not a legal activity for them. So keep that in mind. As we progress through the presentation, we see gambling as a risky activity, and we think it needs to be promoted as such. So, what is gambling? In Connecticut, we define gambling as risking something of value on an activity that has an uncertain outcome. And when I say something of value, most people think of money right away, right? Any form of currency. But it can be anything. I do a lot of work in high schools, especially with 9th graders and some 11th graders as well. And I've heard of students losing shoes, clothes, AirPods, gambling anything that they value away with their friends, as well as time, right? If you're spending time gambling that you need to be spending doing homework, or adults going to work, that is a risk, that's a gamble. Some more definitions, just so we're all on the same page. First and foremost is responsible gambling. These are strategies in which games of chance are offered and played that reduce your risk of harm. So this is things like not gambling more than you can afford to lose. Don't gamble on a credit card, right? Pretty intuitive, but again, youth cannot gamble responsibly in almost every scenario, which is why it's important that we let them know that this is a risky activity so they don't engage in it. Problem gambling is a pattern of gambling engagement that's so extreme it causes an individual to have multiple problems in their life. So I think about it in aspects like work, school, and home, experiencing issues in those domains. And then lastly, gambling disorder. So for any clinicians in the room, you might recognize this as a gambling addiction. That's what it is. It's based on a set of criteria from the DSM-5. So in Connecticut, we have legalized just about every form of gambling that you can imagine. And again, this is why I'm here. So in 2018, our Supreme Court made it legal to gamble on sports. Historically, it was not legal, and then it was in 2018. And then in 2021, in Connecticut here, we legalized online sports betting and online gambling as well. So you can go do online casinos through Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods websites. So we have a huge lottery. That's your scratch tickets, your Keno, your Powerball. Like I said, 2 very large casinos with the slot machines and table games. Off-track betting, we do have one site in our region at Sports Haven. Most of you have probably driven past it a million times. It's, like I said, in New Haven. Charitable games, so this is raffles, bingo, and we let youth engage in these activities all the time, right? We do them in school gyms, we do them in the nursing home with grandma. They're really normalized. And then we have the stock market and cryptocurrency as well, which is less popular among youth, but it's still popping up. And I'm gonna hold off on online gambling because we're really gonna dive into that in a moment. But these are the legal age limits you have to be. So again, we're looking at 18 and 21 pretty much across the board, except for some video game related stuff and some of the charitable games, so raffles and bingo. But when we look at online gambling, this is really growing among high school students, especially high school boys that play sports. And again, we just want to acknowledge that this is a risky behavior and give you parents some information to know what to look for if your teen might be struggling. So we have sports betting now in Connecticut. We have 3 legal operators. We have DraftKings, FanDuel, and Fanatics. You do have to be 21 on those sites, but we are seeing some issues related to college friends playing bookie for high school students, or them doing some peer-to-peer betting through Cash App and group chats and things like that. So always something to look out for there. Fantasy sports, I'm gonna touch on a little bit later, but that age limit varies. Like I said, we do have online casinos, you have to be 21. Day trading, you have to be 18. Same goes for any sort of crypto trading as well. And then video game related gambling, we'll talk about later. So again, why am I hitting this age piece home? It's because of that brain development. The prefrontal cortex is still developing. And so we know that when you introduce drugs and alcohol to the developing brain, it impacts the developing brain. The same thing happens with gambling and even really heavy video gaming. All right, I'd like to talk about odds. So the Powerball was over $1 billion recently, which was super exciting for lots of people. Most people don't know, though, that your true odds of winning that Powerball are 1 in 292 million. So it's huge, right? We all want that hope, that chance to win, but it is really slim. You're more likely to get attacked by a shark this year. And when we look at sports betting, again, the definition is any instance of placing a bet on a sporting event. And so those apps are legally 21 and up, but we still see youth or sports betting pretty prevalently, especially in our region here in Connecticut, especially among student athletes. So again, it's definitely something to pay attention to. This stat right here, about 1 in 4 of youth aged 14 to 21 have placed a bet on a sporting event in the last year, and that can be in a variety of different ways. Parents, I want you to keep an eye out for this word parlay, because this is the most popular type of sports bet that I'm hearing about in high schools. It's also the most risky. It's the most enticing, but you're also less likely to win, and that thrill is what is bringing people in. The idea of risk is exciting for a lot of people. So if you're hearing any of this language, again, it's really important to tap in, understand what your kids are doing, why they're liking gambling, and just getting a broader understanding is really important. Because again, the gambling that we have today is not like the gambling that it used to be. It's really, really quick. So fantasy sports is really interesting. So obviously we have 2 really popular forms, right? The March Madness brackets that a lot of people do, and then Super Bowl squares as well are super popular. I specifically get concerned in fantasy sports when youth are giving each other punishments for the loser of the fantasy team. Has anybody heard of any of these punishments before? They can be really intense. Like a really popular one is the loser of the fantasy league has to chug a gallon of milk and run laps around the track until they throw up. Like, that's not fun. Nobody really wants their kids doing that. So again, it's just something to keep an eye on. It can be all in good fun, especially if there's no money down, but we need to be understanding why youth are engaging in these behaviors. All right, so let's talk about numbers. I know stats are everybody's favorite thing, especially at 6:30 p.m. But the good news is 85% of the population will never experience any form of harm related to gambling, and that really is good news. The bad news is that 3 to 4% of our population will experience some harm. They'll fall in that problem category where maybe they can't pay the bills that month because they gambled too much. Maybe they're in trouble at work for gambling online on the clock, right? But they haven't experienced an addiction yet. And then 1 to 2% of our population does meet the criteria for a gambling disorder, gambling addiction. The reason I'm here tonight is because youth inherently are at double the risk because of that brain development piece. Also athletes, like I said, 4 times the risk. I don't know if anybody's following the news from the NBA, but there was just a big gambling bust. So again, athletes are at 4 times the risk. Student athletes are at a huge risk. And if we bring these numbers back home to Connecticut, there was a new study done. It was published at the beginning of the year. 1% of our state's population meets the criteria for a gambling addiction, and that sounds so small, but it's actually about 65,000 people. 4.9% are considered in that at-risk category, which is another 177,000 people. So that's about 250,000 people right here in our very small state experiencing problems today. And when we actually think about the magnitude of this, think about it. If you had a family member working through a problem with gambling, you're going to be impacted in some way. Maybe it's emotionally, maybe it's financially, maybe it's physically. Talking about stress, right? Maybe the stress and helping your loved one through something is a lot for you. And so again, it's really important to recognize that this thing does exist. This thing is becoming big. And we're also going to talk about resources at the end so that you know how to adequately address it with your child and with other people in your life as well. All right, let's talk about warning signs. So there's a lot, and I'm not going to talk about all of these in depth because there's a lot of words on this slide. Foremost, anybody who's suddenly interested in gambling or spending more time and money gambling, obviously, maybe something to check into. Withdrawal from family and friends or frequent absences from school or home or work. Again, always something to look at. I love to talk about this one right here, boasting about winning and evasive about losing. So if someone's always telling you that they got a free room at the casino, but not willing to tell you how much time they may have spent there, right? That could be a red flag. Gambling to escape problems, of course, or moving money around, paying for gambling with rent money or mortgage money is always going to be a red flag. We don't want to be gambling money that we can't afford to lose. And then chasing losses. So we say, if you're of age, gambling's a legal form of entertainment. Make sure it's for entertainment. But the second you start chasing those losses to try to make that money back really quickly, that's when there might be concern. All right, so most people don't know this, but your brain on substances like drugs and alcohol goes through a nearly identical process that it does when your brain is gambling. So you can see the two lists here. There's a lot of neuroscience terms, but the only difference, and my little thing is on the wrong line, but the only difference in your brain's system is in the tolerance building stage. So you might be familiar with something like alcohol. The first time you drink alcohol, you may only need one drink to feel that buzz, to get drunk, right? But while you're gambling, the same thing happens, it just looks different because it's a process addiction. So maybe instead of only betting on Sunday night football, you have to bet on Thursday night too to get through the week. Or instead of placing $5 bets like you always have, maybe now you feel compelled to place $10 bets. Again, we just really need to be mindful of this behavior because it builds tolerance in the same way. The addiction forms in the same way, we just don't talk about it as much. I want to talk to you all about some emerging trends as well, especially among youth, especially in the digital world, because it can be really hard to keep up with. It's like always changing. So sort of the newest thing is esports. Essentially, it's competitive video gaming. And so the image that's on this slide that's behind the words, it's actually an esports tournament. They can bring in more people than the Super Bowl. They can fit more people in the Super Bowl because it's all in this digital world. And we've started gambling on it as well. So there are a lot of video game features that you can gamble on. Just for background information, we did find that people who play video games weekly are about 4 times more likely to gamble, so that's pretty significant. And folks that are buying loot boxes, which we'll talk about in a minute, are also associated with folks that are also experiencing problems with gambling and betting on esports tournaments and things like that. So this is just a few things to look out for if your child does game. First and foremost, that's an example of an in-game casino. We see these everywhere, right? On games like Roblox, which like 2-year-olds have access to sometimes, they have casino simulators, bingo, things like that. This is a cozy little Switch game on the Nintendo Switch that has a casino simulator. If you have any students that play Grand Theft Auto, there's a casino in there, right? And that one's really realistic. This photo over here is a loot box. Essentially, you put money in and you don't know what's gonna pop out of that box. It could be the most common item in the game, it could be the most rare, you just never know. And that's actually textbook gambling. And again, we found that students that buy a lot of loot boxes are associated with students that also have issues with gambling. This last example is a little outdated, but it does still exist. For any parents of gamers, you might be familiar with the term skins. They're basically just customizations for your avatar or your weapons in some games. They typically don't make you any better at the game, they just make you look cool. And think about it like collecting baseball cards, if you're familiar with that. Like, the rarer cards are more valuable. The same thing happens in our digital world, and so we figured out a way to upload them and gamble them, and it's got really complicated. I do want to touch on the suicide piece because, again, it's another big reason that I'm here. Out of every addiction that you can think of, gambling does unfortunately have the highest comorbidity with suicide. And we think there's a lot of reasons for this, and number one is stigma. Most people don't know that it can become an addiction. Most people don't realize that it can become a problem. And so again, it's just always important to keep in mind that there are absolutely resources that are available to address gambling specifically, and 988 to address any sort of mental health concerns as well, and people are always willing to help. And just a few more stats about mental health. Again, there's a lot of comorbidities in those with a gambling disorder, gambling addiction. So we have about half who've experienced a mood disorder, which is something like depression. About 41% report anxiety, and about 61% a personality disorder. And there's a lot of substance use that goes hand in hand with gambling as well. So namely alcohol, about 75% of those with a gambling disorder also report issues with alcohol. And the substance use is about 10 times higher in those who gamble regularly. So again, why am I here talking to you all tonight? Well, teen gambling is on the rise. Like I said, I work with a lot of 9th graders. I was just in a school all day today talking with 7th graders. And these kids know what's going on. They know what's going on more than I do sometimes, and I do this work full time. And so again, it's just really important to recognize what might be going on with your kids. So if your child is having more depression and anxiety issues or mental health issues in general, obviously that's always a prompt to check in. But also struggling with behavioral issues that are kind of out of character. Most people don't jump to gambling first, but it may be an important consideration if your child especially is involved in sports, like I said earlier. Okay, let's talk about risk factors. So there's, again, a lot of different risk factors, and a lot of them are vague on purpose because these can apply to lots of different substances and processes, but I want to talk about the first 3. So having an early big win is one of the biggest risk factors that you can have to develop a gambling problem. That means the first time you scratch a scratch-off ticket, you win $100, that automatically puts you at a really high risk. Why? Well, it tricks you into thinking that you can do that every time, right? You're the luckiest person in the world, this is really easy, when in fact we know statistically that's not true, but this can take hold in your brain really, really quickly. Secondly, having early access to gambling. So I know my grandparents still every year give us all scratch-offs in our birthday cards, right? So as a child, I had early access to gambling. That would inherently be a risk factor as well. And then 3 is holding mistaken beliefs about odds. The house always wins, and we know that the house always wins, right? Casinos and other operators are there to make money. So we need to always remember that they're there to make a profit too. And so, yeah, the house always wins at the end of the day. Of course, there's some other ones. Again, any history with mental health or substance use puts you at an increased risk for gambling as well. You just really need to be mindful of your gambling behaviors. And I just want to emphasize again that today's gambling is so different. For anybody that might be familiar with sports betting, you might know that we're not just gambling on or betting on who's going to win the game, Team A or Team B. You can bet on the speed of every pitch in a baseball game. It is constant, and it's nonstop, and it is fast. And it's in your face, too. It's in your kids' face. DraftKings has billboards all over the highway, ads all over TikTok, throughout the NFL games they're promoting. And so again, it's just really important to be mindful that this thing is growing, and it's just something else to pay attention to as we move forward. So resources, there's a couple. First is the Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling. They have a 24/7 helpline. You can call, text, live chat. They also have a really great website with lots of other resources for parents and teachers. So I'd highly suggest you check it out. The helpline operators, I know them personally. They're really great, and they're always, like I said, always willing to help. And then it wouldn't be a Braille presentation if I didn't do some shameless self-promotion. I also coordinate the Regional Gambling Awareness Team for Region 2, which is our region. It covers 34 towns. And essentially, I do presentations like this all the time, especially working with youth trying to raise awareness. Because again, we don't want that stigma to be there. It's known as the hidden addiction, and we want to unhide it. We want to talk about it. So if you're interested in learning more, please let me know. And then again, I'm going to promote 988 because I think it is a beautiful, life-saving resource. Please use it if you need it. My links got a little messy there, but if you want to take some pictures, if you're interested in more resources, here is some more resources for you. We have the National Council, some 12-step meetings for those that might be interested, Demas Problem Gambling Services, and then some other really helpful websites and tools. And that is it for me. The QR code is completely optional. It's a survey from the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. The only reason I promote it is it gives you your own risk percentage score at the end of the survey. So if that is something you're interested in, it's absolutely an option. And like I said, I'll be around if you have any questions. So thank you all for being such a great audience.